One day the Prophet, peace be upon him, was standing on the mountain of Uhud in Medina, and with him were the three great Caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, and Uthman radiallahu anhu. But suddenly an earthquake struck and the mountain of Uhud began to shake. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "O mountain of Uhud, stop. Standing upon you are a prophet, a Siddiq, and two martyrs." After this hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, passed away, but Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu could never forget this statement for the rest of his entire life. That is why during his entire caliphate, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu used to make a very unique and strange supplication. "O Allah, grant me the death of a martyr, but grant me martyrdom in the city of your messenger, Medina." Hearing this supplication of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, people used to ask him how such a thing could be possible. They argued that all the wars in Arabia had now ended and Medina was the safest city in the world. So who could possibly martyr you here? But Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu would reply that if Allah willed it, it would surely happen. However, the martyrdom of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was no ordinary or small event in the world, because before becoming a martyr, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had established the largest empire in the world. It was such a massive empire that from the time of Prophet Adam, peace be upon him, until the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, no one else had been able to build a larger empire than this. This means that the empire of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was even larger than the empires of Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and even Pharaoh. But today it is a matter of great sorrow that apart from Muslims, the rest of the entire world calls Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu simply Umar. Even on Google, he is only referred to as Umar. On the other hand, the whole world remembers Alexander today by the name of Alexander the Great, even though Alexander's empire was nothing compared to the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. This record of the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu could not be broken by anyone for the next several centuries. But finally, after 600 years, a king broke his record whom we all know very well. Now, one of the greatest achievements of the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was the conquest of Egypt, the land of Pharaoh, which was the most powerful and wealthy region of the world at that time. But now, while all the attention of the Muslims was focused towards Egypt, the Persian king got some time to relax. He utilized this time to send his final letters to all his generals and citizens, saying to them that if you all do not wake up even now, Umar will destroy our 800-year-old Persian Empire forever. Following this, the public of the Persian Empire picked up their swords from all sides and began forming a massive army, preparing themselves for the final battle against the Muslims. Now, when the Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu in Medina came to know about this development, he decided that he would gather the entire army of the Muslims at one single place and send them for the final fight against the Persian Empire. But his major minister, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, stopped him from doing this and said, "If we gather the entire army of the Muslims at one single place, it might happen that the Roman Empire attacks us once again." This perspective of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu was highly appreciated by Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu. Therefore, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu left his own opinion, accepted the advice of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, and gathered small groups of armies from various regions to launch the final assault on the Persian Empire. In this manner, the Muslims once again began conquering many forts of the Persian Empire, among which understanding the story of one specific fort is highly important, because the leader of this fort was named Hormuzan, who was the most powerful general of the Persian Empire at that time. For this reason, the Muslims conquered the city of Hormuzan with immense difficulty. But as soon as this city was conquered, Hormuzan began fleeing from the Muslim army and the Muslims started chasing him. While running away, Hormuzan climbed to the top of the tallest building in his city and began shouting loudly, saying, "I possess 100 arrows, and with these 100 arrows, I will pick and kill each Muslim one by one. But I have one condition. If the Muslims promise me that they will take me directly to Umar ibn Al-Khattab, then I am ready to surrender." The Muslims agreed and said, "All right, what is the big deal in this?" So they captured Hormuzan and dispatched him straight to Medina to meet the Caliph. Hormuzan entered Medina for the first time, and he imagined that Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu would have a massive palace, and would be seated in a very large royal court just like other kings. But he was completely astonished to see that such a great ruler of the world was resting on the bare ground inside a very simple building. It is said that upon seeing this, Hormuzan even asked where the caliph's guards were. He was told that Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu does not require such things. People woke up Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu and informed him that this very high-ranking general of the Persian Empire had come to meet him. But Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu stated, "I will not speak to him as long as he is wearing these royal garments of kings. Go and change his clothes." When Hormuzan changed his clothes and was presented before Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu looking like an absolute ordinary human being, only then did Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu permit him to come close. However, because of this Hormuzan, so many Muslims had already been martyred before that Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had firmly intended to give him the death penalty. But immediately upon arrival, Hormuzan requested to be given some water to drink. As soon as the water was handed over to him, Hormuzan said in front of everyone present there to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, "Make a promise to me that until I drink this water, nobody will execute me." As soon as Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu accepted Hormuzan's request, Hormuzan threw that water onto the ground and declared, "I have not drunk the water at all. In fact, I can never drink this water now. And now, according to your promise, nobody can kill me." Seeing this cleverness, Hormuzan quickly accepted Islam and managed to save his life in Medina. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu also forgave Hormuzan upon seeing this, but he was well aware that Hormuzan was no ordinary person. Being the army chief of the entire Persian Empire, Hormuzan knew every single corner of that empire. For this reason, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu allowed Hormuzan to reside in Medina, and moreover, he even appointed him as his personal advisor against the Persian Empire. But Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was completely unaware that one day, this very Hormuzan would play a massive role in his martyrdom. When the Persian king found out about the arrest of the army chief Hormuzan, he became extremely furious because this was an immense humiliation for the Persian Empire. So they began gathering their army with even greater speed and ultimately, by collecting a massive force from across the entire Persian Empire, they prepared themselves to fight the final war against the Muslims in the Iranian city of Nahavand. Now here, there is a slight historical confusion regarding who actually delivered the news of the gathering of the Persian army to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, whether it was the former governor Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu or the new governor Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu, who was a very prominent companion and whose parents were the very first to sacrifice their lives for Islam. When Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu learned about this, he called a meeting of all his ministers and asked them what they should do. On this, Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu gave him the advice that he himself should lead a massive army and go to fight against the Persian king. But Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu suggested that no, the Caliph should remain in Medina and send someone else instead. Once again, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu preferred the opinion of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, gathered a large army of 30,000 soldiers, and dispatched them for the final war against the Persian Empire. Following this, the last monumental battle between Islam and Persia took place in Nahavand, and after experiencing immense difficulties, the Muslims finally won this war. But this battle was so dangerous and severe that after the battles of Yarmouk and Qadisiyah, the maximum number of people were killed in this specific war, and the general of the Muslims, Nu'man bin Muqarrin, was also martyred in this very battle. The Muslims won this battle, but after this war, the history of the Muslims changed forever because the Muslims captured a specific man in this war, whose name was Firoz. After the war, the Arabs named him Abu Lulu'a, and he became the slave of Mughira bin Shurba. But Firoz was completely different from all the other slaves because he was a highly skilled blacksmith of that era. Seeing his talent, Abu Lulu'a's master Mughira bin Shurba brought him to the capital of the Muslims, Medina, where he used to perform ironwork for his master, and he started living right there in Medina. Over there in the Persian Empire, the Muslims now had a completely free hand, and they began conquering every single territory with ease. Eventually, one army of the Muslims reached up to Azerbaijan, and for the first time in history under the Caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, another Muslim army crossed the borders of India and entered inside, which is the Balochistan region of present-day Pakistan. In this manner, this entire region and the whole Persian Empire came to an end forever. Ultimately, seeing this destruction, the Persian king also began fleeing from the Muslims, and when he found absolutely no shelter anywhere in the entire world, he was forced to go and live in China. The king of China welcomed him very warmly. This was the grandson of that very same Persian king to whom, many years ago, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had sent a letter inviting him towards Islam. The grandfather of this king had torn the letter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, with extreme arrogance. But now the army of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had conquered the entire Persian Empire forever. This meant that this Muslim caliphate, which at one time was just a tiny state of Medina, had now expanded all the way to India and China and stood as the biggest superpower in the world. But just as the Muslim army arrived close to the border of Pakistan, this marked the final period of the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, because just a few days after this, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was martyred. The issue was that sometime before this, the slave whom the Muslims had captured and brought to Medina, Firoz or Abu Lulu'a, used to live alongside the Muslims in Medina. But he was never happy here. It is said that whenever he looked at the children of his native region in Medina, he would say, "Because of these Arabs, we have been completely destroyed today." Apart from this, he used to repeatedly say, "I wish I had died in the Battle of Nahrawan before witnessing this enslavement by the Arabs." This meant that Firoz harbored immense hatred in his heart for the Muslims. With this deep-seated hatred, Firoz went to Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu one day and complained to him, saying, "My master Mughira oppresses me severely. He forces me to pay him 2 dirhams every single day for my earnings." 2 dirhams. The caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had expanded so rapidly that the Muslims had not yet had the time to manufacture their own currency. Therefore, during his caliphate, Muslims used the silver dirham coins manufactured by the Persian Empire. If the value of Abu Lulu'a's 2 dirhams is calculated in today's era, it amounts to around 1,500 or 1,600 rupees. When he informed Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu about this amount, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu asked him, "What work do you do?" He replied, "I work with wood and iron." Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu then told him, "In that case, this amount is absolutely fair and correct." But upon hearing this decision, Firoz became extremely angry with him, and right there in front of everyone he declared, "Umar's justice is for everyone in the world except for me," and he walked away from there. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu sent Firoz back, but in his heart he still intended to personally speak to his master Mughira regarding this matter so that he might reduce his tax. A few days after this incident, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu spotted Firoz again in the marketplace of Medina. In order to lighten his mood and please him, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu said to him, "O Abu Lulu'a, I have heard that you construct very excellent grinding mills. Will you make one for me as well?" But Firoz still held that same anger for Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu in his heart. So he replied to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, "Why not? I will construct such a grinding mill for you that the entire world will remember it from this day forward." Now, he said this in such a tone that Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu immediately understood that Firoz was issuing a threat to him. He even mentioned this very thing to the other companions, saying, "This man has threatened me." But the law of Islam dictates that no one can arrest any other individual based purely on suspicion, even if the person in question is a king. For this reason, despite this clear threat, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu let Firoz go. This proves that despite being the Caliph of the entire empire, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu did not consider himself above the law. After issuing this threat, Firoz left the spot, but he had firmly decided in his heart that he would not leave Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu alive. First of all, Firoz went and began manufacturing a highly dangerous and unique dagger. This was a specific type of dagger that was gripped from the center, and it featured extremely sharp blades on both of its sides. Not only this, but as soon as this dagger was ready, Firoz began preparing a highly deadly poison. In the Persia of that era, the poison that people commonly utilized was mostly extracted from the hemlock plant, which appears very beautiful to look at, but even a tiny particle of it completely burns a human being from the inside. For this reason, this plant was the favorite poison of the assassins of that time. It is recorded that many years before this, a great philosopher, Socrates, was also killed using this exact same poison. Firoz kept his unique dagger submerged inside this poison for the entire night. And then the very next day, before the congregational Fajr prayer, he went and hid in a corner of Masjid an-Nabawi, waiting for the Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu to arrive. As soon as Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu heard the call to Fajr prayer the next morning, he woke up and departed to offer his final prayer in the mosque. Even before the arrival of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, the Muslims had already stood up in rows for the prayer inside the mosque. Yet Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was passing through each row, inspecting them and commanding them, "O Muslims, straighten your prayer rows." At this moment, just moments before his martyrdom, the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu extended from Algeria in the west, all the way to India in the east. This means that if 25 or 30 countries of the modern world are combined together, only then would they equal the single caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. But here, it is essential to understand that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had already foretold all of this. Just 25 years before the martyrdom of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, when there were only a few followers of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in Makkah, and people used to oppress them severely, even in those harsh circumstances, the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to tell everyone that one day these very Muslims would conquer both the global superpowers, the Roman and the Persian empires. Upon hearing this, the people of Makkah always used to mock him immensely and would say, "The Muslims cannot even protect themselves from us, so how will these people fight against superpowers?" But today, just a few years later, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had fulfilled those words of the Prophet, peace be upon him, during his caliphate. Because today the Muslims were the biggest superpower on earth, and Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was the most powerful king in the world. Finally, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu stood in the place of the Imam in front of the Muslims and commenced the prayer saying, "Allahu Akbar." It is stated that Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu used to recite Surah Yusuf from the Quran in every Fajr prayer, in which Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, transitions from being a slave to becoming the supreme leader of entire Egypt. But today, that very same Egypt was merely a small province of the caliphate of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. However, in the final prayer of his life, as soon as Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu started the prayer, Abu Lulu'a came running from behind at full speed, and with his poisoned dagger, he struck Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu with immense force. And then he struck him a second time, and he struck him yet again. In this manner, Abu Lulu'a rapidly inflicted 6 severe wounds upon Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, and Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, the Muslims standing in the rows behind tried to capture Abu Lulu'a. But in order to escape from there, Firoz martyred 9 more individuals with that same dagger. But ultimately, when the Muslims successfully trapped him, Firoz used that very dagger to slit his own throat and committed suicide. Now the Muslims standing further back were completely unaware that an attack had been carried out against Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. Therefore, they were all confused as to why Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had suddenly stopped the prayer. Seeing this situation, Abdur Rahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu stepped forward and completed the remaining prayer of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. A short while after this, when Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu regained consciousness, he asked, "O Ibn Abbas, who was the one who struck me?" He was informed that it was that same slave of Mughira bin Shuba, Firoz. Upon hearing this, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu said, "Praise be to Allah that I was not killed by a Muslim who recites the kalima." This means that Firoz had attacked the most powerful king and caliph in the world, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, merely over an issue of 2 dirhams. But there is also another angle to this story. Ever since Firoz had arrived in Medina, he was absolutely not happy here and harbored severe animosity toward the Muslims. He kept his distance from the general public of Medina and used to roam around with only one specific person, who was none other than Hurmuzan. It is recorded that the very dagger used to strike Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had been seen by people in the possession of Hurmuzan just a single day prior to the incident. Due to this reason, many historians suggest that this attack by Firoz was not an isolated act, but rather a well-thought-out conspiracy by the Persian Empire and this conspiracy was masterminded by the former general of the Persian Empire, Hormuzan, who was sitting right there in Medina. Consequently, a few days after the martyrdom of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, one of his sons, Ubaidullah, took the life of Hormuzan as well. However, this remains a highly controversial historical issue, and today nobody knows exactly what transpired there. Anyhow, the Muslims carried Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu from the mosque and brought him to his home. The wounds inflicted upon the body of Umar radiallahu anhu were so deep that after bringing him home, when he was given date water and milk to drink instead of settling in his stomach, it began flowing out directly from his open wounds. Seeing this sight, Hazrat Umar's doctor told him, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, remember Allah, meaning you have very little time left with you." Hearing this, some people sitting near Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu began weeping. Umar radiallahu anhu scolded them and said, "Whoever wishes to cry should leave and go outside from here." Normally, when a person is dying, people offer him consolation, but the personality of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was such that even after hearing the news of his impending death, it made absolutely no difference to him. Upon hearing the news of his death, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu first of all commanded, "Calculate whatever debt I owe." It was discovered that Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was under a debt of 86,000 dirhams. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu then commanded his son and his family, "Ensure that this debt is paid off after I am gone." The people sitting beside him said, "What is the need to do such a thing? All of this is the money that you have distributed from your own side to the poor and the orphans." But Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu completely refused to do so, and after his martyrdom, the very house in which he was martyred was sold to clear the debt of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. Who purchased this house? It was bought by a very wealthy companion and the future Caliph, Hazrat Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan radiallahu anhu. When the news spread across the entire city of Medina that their beloved Caliph Umar radiallahu anhu would no longer survive in this world, sounds of weeping began emerging from every single household. In fact, one companion stated that on the day of Hazrat Umar's martyrdom, the people of Medina were crying in such a manner as if the only son of every single household had passed away, because Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had governed his people not like a typical king, but like a loving father. Now, while Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was taking the final breaths of his life upon his bed, he called his son Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu and disclosed the final wish of his life to him. "Go and ask the wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, whether Umar can be buried alongside his two companions. But remember to say Umar and do not say Amir al-Mu'mineen." Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu did this deliberately so that Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha might not mistake it for an official command of the Caliph and accept it out of compulsion. Upon hearing this request, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha expressed, "I had always wished to keep this spot reserved for myself, because inside her room, her husband, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was resting on one side and her father, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, was on the other side." But Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha stated, "Today, I consider Umar more deserving of this place than my own self." When Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu found out about this, he became extremely delighted and said, "This was the ultimate wish of my life." Along with this, he gave a final command: "Once I pass away, make sure to ask Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha one more time." Now, there was a custom in Arabia that whenever a very prominent man died, a highly expensive shroud was manufactured for him, and all kinds of perfumes were applied to that shroud. But Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu strictly told his son, "After my death, purchase only an absolute ordinary shroud for me, and do not apply any kind of perfume to it." Then, at his absolute final moment, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu said to his son, "Remove my head from the pillow now and place it directly on the bare ground. Perhaps Allah might show mercy upon me." In this manner, after remaining the Caliph of the Muslims for 10 years and 6 months, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu departed from this world. Thus the second Caliph of Islam was laid to rest in Medina, right beside the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But before his passing, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had nominated 6 individuals for the position of the next Caliph, and he had commanded, As soon as I die, lock these 6 individuals inside a single house, and within just 3 days announce the next Caliph of Islam. Subscribe.